Hello guys, welcome to another video, and in this one I'm going to be covering my 0.5 League starter for Path of Exile 2, which is going to be a Boneshatter Martial Artist, or more aptly named the Bellshatter Martial Artist, because this build is going to be focusing on the Bell interaction here from this Ascendancy. And let's just get straight into it, beginning with that main interaction that the build's going to be focusing on, which is the Hollow Focus Technique ability there that comes from this node. So you'll be able to get this from your first Ascension, and this is a persistent skill, so you don't actually have to use this skill. It's kind of happening all the time, and it will spawn bells around you. It will spawn a bell randomly within 3 meter radius of you, and it does that every 2 seconds here on a level 20 skill. This will probably be quite a bit higher on an early level, so you won't get it quite as often. But essentially, what's going on here is that this is a bell that you can hit once, and it will then be destroyed. But upon being hit, it will cause a shockwave in an area around it, which deals attack damage, 237% damage there of weapon damage at level 20. And then it can't cause stun build-up, but it is quite a large area of effect there. Shockwave radius is 2.5 meters. And this is going to be a bit of supplementary damage, but the main reason we're using this is actually the interaction for hitting the bell itself. So there's a special interaction here. The bells are themselves always primed for stun. They can be cold, and hits against them are always critical hits. Now, we're not going to be interacting with the cold section of that on this build, but we are going to be using both the primed for stun and critical hit section, because those are really powerful. So, the bells are always primed for stun. Now, that interacts directly with Boneshatter. Boneshatter is a mace ability, and it's a strike ability, and it says that the strike will cause a heavy stun on enemies that are primed for stun. Upon causing a heavy stun, it will also create a shockwave, dealing a large amount of damage in an area. Now you can see that the base damage of this skill is quite modest, 312% at level 20, but the shockwave that it does when it actually causes a heavy stun is much stronger, 724% of weapon damage, and that happens in an area of effect as well. So even though this is a strike, it will cause this shockwave in an area of effect. Not quite as big as the 2.5 from the bell, but still a decent radius. And this is the core interaction for the build that we're going to be playing around. The idea that we can always hit the bell to cause a shockwave to clear everything around it. And upon hitting the bell, we're going to get a shockwave from Boneshatter. We're also going to get a shockwave from Hollow Focus. And we will also get a shockwave, a third shockwave, from Hollow Resonance. Now this is the second node that comes off of this branch, so we'll be able to get this in the second lab. And Hollow Resonance says, attaches an ethereal bell to your back. Critical hits with other skills will cause the bell to ring out, damaging nearby enemies. So this is a little bit like Shockwave support from PoE 1 for people who have played that build, kind of, Cyclone Shockwave in PoE 1, where you basically just go around and the main damage is coming from your Shockwave. This is kind of similar to that. You have this thing attached to your back, and whenever you deal a critical hit with another skill, you'll kind of get this area of effect around you that deals damage. And here is the really cool thing. This happens when you deal a critical hit. So critical hits with other skills will cause the bell to ring out. Now the thing is about maces, they're not really known for critical hit interactions because they have low base crit, and they're not really balanced around the ability to be able to crit. But hits against the Hollow Focus Technique bells are always critical hits. So every time we hit a bell with Boneshatter, we'll get one shockwave from Boneshatter because of the heavy stun, one from Hollow Focus Bell because that's being hit and it's being exploded, and the third shockwave will come from Hollow Resonance because that hit dealt a critical hit to the bell, and therefore this will also proc for a third shockwave. And whilst this one does the lowest damage of the three at 187%, really important there, this can build up heavy stun. So the other two there, you'll notice Boneshatter is kind of this combo ability, at least that's how it was originally intended to be, where you build up stun with another skill or several other skills, and then you use this as kind of a finisher to be able to execute that shockwave, but you cannot cause stun build up with this skill. This is the same over here with Hollow Focus Technique. You can't cause stun build up with this shockwave here, you can see that right there, cannot cause stun build up. But Hollow Resonance Technique actually can cause stun build-up, and not only can it, but it does 150% more stun build-up, and that means we are going to be able to build up stun on the boss, for example, when we actually do this combo on them, and that's important because Boneshatter has an extra line here, which is 50% more damage from hits for shockwaves originating from a unique enemy. So whenever we can actually build up that heavy stun on the boss and reach the heavy stun, we can then use Boneshatter on the boss instead of the bell, and that's going to deal a lot more damage. However, that's not all that's going on here with this build, because there's another crazy interaction that I want to discuss right now, and this is the kind of interaction that sealed the deal for me when it came to this build. This is why I want to do this build, because I think this is extremely powerful, and that is that the hits against Hollow Focus Bell are guaranteed critical hits, and that is kind of crazy when it comes to maces. As I already mentioned there, maces are not really balanced around being able to crit. They have very low base crit and very high damage numbers, but when you're able to guarantee a crit, that is exceptionally powerful. And you may be thinking, well, this is a crit against the bell, right? So it doesn't really matter. But here's the thing. Crits in this game, if they cause an area of effect around something, it counts the crit on the target, and then it will deal a crit in an area of effect. It's not going to roll the crit again. It's already rolled the crit chance, and it will hit the area, and anything around it will be a crit. Now, I can actually showcase that here in-game, because I wanted to test this to confirm that that theory was correct. So, on this character, I can actually show you what I've got here to test this out. I'm using the Atsak's Sight helmet there, which says critical hits poison the enemy. And I also have Nebulock to guarantee a crit there, attacks consume an endurance charge to critically hit. Then over here I have the basic Mace Strike there with stun build-up, so I can actually, have stun ready to go on a target. And then I have Boneshatter. I just have a bit of area effects there to guarantee that it's going to hit the target near it. And I have some other things here like Magma Barrier to help me build up endurance charges. And I can actually show you that this does indeed critically strike in an area. So the shockwave itself is going to deal the critical strike to all targets around it, not just the target that was hit. So let's go over here and find some enemies. Ideally, we'll find a rare somewhere. Here's a rare. So we're going to build up a bit of stun. So this guy here is ready to be stunned. We'll get an endurance charge. And all of the targets were poisoned there from that crit. Let's try it again. There we go. All poisoned once again. Now, I'll leave that going in the background there for even more examples of that in action, but essentially what this means is that every time we hit the Hollow Focus Bell with Boneshatter, we're not only dealing this shockwave right here for 724%, and that's probably going to be a lot higher once we get, skill gem level scaling and things like that, but it's not going to be 724%, it's going to be double that at a baseline because it's a critical hit. And that also means that we can invest into some kind of crazy scaling vectors because we no longer worry about critical hit chance, we only scale critical damage bonus. So for example, over here on the passive skill tree, you can take nodes like this one right here, 36% increased damage if you've dealt a critical hit in the past 8 seconds. Well, even without scaling critical hit chance, you will always have dealt a crit in the past 8 seconds because you're constantly hitting the bells. There's also this node over here, which is Throat Seeker, which says 60% increased critical damage bonus and 20% reduced critical hit chance. Again, it doesn't matter because we're not going to be scaling critical hit chance, we will only be scaling critical damage bonus. So this is just going to be extremely strong. I kind of expect this build to be able to just almost one-shot bosses all the way through the campaign, because every time a bell spawns next to a boss, we're just going to be able to Boneshatter the bell. It's going to deal insane damage. Just think about whenever you play a mace build and you're kind of going through the campaign, whenever you do get the heavy stun on the boss, the Boneshatter does so much damage, but it's going to be that damage there, and then it's also going to be a crit. So it's just going to be doing a huge amount of damage, and that's just the Boneshatter alone. There's also the extra damage coming from the shockwave from not just one bell, but 2. So that's the base interaction of the build. That is the whole point of rolling Boneshatter on Martial Artist for this setup here. But let's just discuss the rest of the Ascendancy, because that's only 2 notables. For the third lab, I'm going to be going for Way of the Stonefist, which is basically this node that allows you to upgrade your gloves into a more powerful version. We don't really have all of the details on this right now, But the main takeaway from this is that you can get a huge amount of defenses from your gloves. Like, it can almost be akin to a body armor, the amount of evasion and energy shield you're able to get from it, which is really, really powerful. But there's also some strong modifiers on here. In the trailer, we got to see, for example, 10% power charge on crit. That is quite a rare modifier that appears on a unique body armor, for example, but getting it as a modifier on your gloves is really powerful. That would mean that the build would be able to make use of power charges, or indeed endurance charges with resonance, because we can actually get there very easily on the tree here. That would convert those power charge gain into endurance charges if we wanted to do that instead. And I haven't really looked too much into charge usage just yet, but I'm sure we'd be able to make good use of either charge there in the build. And there's also another modifier that was shown off for the Way of the Stonefist for a rare pair of gloves that had 10% to the quality of all skills. And that is actually a really nice stat to have, because Boneshatter took a little bit of a nerf in this patch just in regards to the quality here. It used to have 30% increased attack speed, it's now going to have 20%. So you're basically going to be able to get to what that was before if you have that modifier. But more importantly than that, the Hollow Focus skill here has a quality stat which is actually really, really good. It's lowering the radius that bells can actually spawn around you so they appear closer to you, and this will make them more reliable, just generally speaking, because right now on a baseline it's bells spawning within 3 meters radius on you. If you just stand on top of the boss, right on top of the boss, it means that they spawn within a 3 meter radius around the boss, and then the shockwave itself here, the damaging part, is dealing damage within a 2.5 meter radius. Boneshatter is dealing damage within a base 2 meter radius. But if you scale up the quality there and get the radius a bit lower, that combined with, area of effect scaling here on Boneshatter and on Hollow Focus will mean that you are much more likely to have those bells within immediate radius of the boss, so you can just continuously hit them for mega damage. Now, the last thing I'll say about the Way of the Stonefist skill there is that there's some interesting things that could be there with unique gloves, and since this build isn't really fixed on anything yet in terms of gear, the idea of making use of that and then finding a really cool, unique pair of gloves that you can use in this build is quite enticing, so I think that's really cool as a third Ascendancy option. And then we have the last Ascendancy option, which is kind of a toss-up between Runic Meridians and Way of the Mountain there. So I'll quickly go over Way of the Mountain first. So this is basically a hybrid damage defense node. It is 100% surpassing chance per enemy power to gain Mountain's Teachings on immobilizing an enemy up to a maximum of 30 stacks, and then you lose a Mountain's Teachings whenever you're hit or when you sustain an attack that benefits from Mountain's Teachings. So whenever you do use an attack there, you'll lose a stack and that attack will deal 15% more damage, or whenever you would get hit, you actually take that hit, and if the hit would deal less or equal to 30% of your max life, it will be lessened by 40%, and on top of that you get the bonus of actually having 50% more stun threshold while you have the stacks. So this is quite a nice buff to have. It's kind of a more generic based buff there, which is quite nice. But the one thing that I'm not too sure about when it comes to this in combination with this build is that I already mentioned Hollow Focus technique cannot do stun build up, nor can Boneshatter. The last thing that can is this bell here. But I think it's going to be a little bit less reliable in terms of building up stacks. Basically, every time we hit the Hollow Focus bell, we'll be gaining 1 stack of Mountain's Teachings, and then if this Hollow Resonance technique bell is able to heavy stun enemies, that will also grant us more stacks. But I think what's going to happen more likely is that the Boneshatter damage deals its damage first, and that will actually kill monsters before Hollow Resonance can even interact with them. So I expect we won't get that many Mountain's Teaching stacks in that method, but you could do something where, for example, you convert your damage to cold to be able to freeze. That would also work because this does need you to immobilize, not specifically heavy stun, so you could use, freeze or electrocution or things like that. So this is definitely an option. However, I'm definitely leaning more towards Runic Meridians because I think this is actually going to be a really good node. A lot of people were a bit underwhelmed by this when it was revealed there compared to the other nodes on this Ascendancy, but especially with all the new runes coming in, I think this is going to be a really nice comfort pick as the 4th Ascendancy because it allows you to have a lot more freedom on your gear. For example, resistances are not really a problem because you have a bunch of extra sockets where you can just socket extra resistance runes and things like that. That will free up your other gear to be able to, go for other things. And I just think, generally speaking, with all of the new runes coming into the game, there's going to be some really good stuff you can do with this. I think this node is going to end up being quite powerful indeed. But we'll have to wait and see. As I said, that last option, not guaranteed there, but I think I am leaning more towards Runic Meridians. Now, lastly, I will mention that I have made a Mobalytics guide there, which is currently extremely bare bones. There's nothing really in there right now other than what I've already said in this video. But I am going to be updating that through the course of today. I just haven't really had the time before this. I've been really, really busy with other things. But I am going to be using some time today to actually update that guide and basically put in a brief kind of plan of what I'm planning to do at League Start. For example, I will be leveling with a mace from the get-go on Monk, which is going to be an interesting experience. I actually think it's going to be quite good, and that's because they made a few changes in this patch. Brink is now going to be a level 1 support. That's the increased stun build-up support, and Rolling Slam is actually having a less base attack time. So instead of a 1.5 seconds, it's now 1 second. So you can actually execute that first hit faster, which means you can then immediately go to Boneshatter faster, and that's going to mean you get swarmed a little bit less in those early zones. And Monk actually has some really good things when it comes to maces. You can immediately splash here, obviously, into these nodes if you need strength to actually be able to equip the mace. But beginning right here, you have 4% skill speed on these two nodes, which is really good on mace because those are very slow at the beginning. You also have increased attack speed here, 8%, and you can go straight through these skill speed nodes here and immediately get into a damage wheel. So I actually think this is going to be completely fine on this side of the tree. There's a lot of extra damage and attack speed up here and area of effects and things like that, so I don't think there's going to be any problem there. And as soon as we actually are able to get to the first Ascension and get Hollow Focus Technique, that's when the build is immediately coming online with that bell. You can straight away start to get those guaranteed crits, and the damage is going to be so much higher, and you have the extra shockwave there, and there's just a lot of quality of life coming immediately as soon as you get that skill. But again, if you do want to follow along, there is the Mobalytics guide there in the description. Just check back for updates. I'm going to be updating that today with my rough plan. Things will probably change as I actually play the patch because it's kind of a bit of an experimental build. But I'm definitely looking forward to this one. This looks like a really fun build, and I think it's going to be really, really strong. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.